Good evening, Tanse Yanin. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Daryl Stranger. We begin in Saskatchewan with news that many will find disturbing. The English River First Nation says a ground-penetrating radar search on the site of the former Beauval residential school has uncovered several possible unmarked graves of infants. The First Nation started the search 1 year ago. It now says the GPR findings have produced several positive hits or areas of interest at this site, which are consistent with what they now believe are 93 possible unmarked graves. In a statement, the English River First Nation Elders Council said horrifying and grueling stories of abuse from survivors have been circulating for generations. The Elders Council said, quote, "These children and babies are no longer lost. They were never forgotten, and we find some relief in that they have been discovered," unquote. The community has asked for privacy at this time. A press conference will be held on August 29th. And the National Indian Residential School Crisis Line is available for survivors and others who might need support. That number is 1-866-925-4419. The younger brother of a murdered First Nations girl is taking up the torch in the fight for justice for missing and murdered women, girls, and Two-Spirit people. Elroy Fontaine is hosting a gathering at Odana Circle in Winnipeg to draw attention to the ongoing crisis and to keep his sister Tina Fontaine's memory alive. APTN's Leanne Sanders reports.
For CFS bringing me down to their office and them sitting us down in a room and them telling us that my sister Tina was murdered.
Elroy Fontaine was just a young child in foster care when his older sister, Tina Fontaine, went missing. The 15-year-old girl disappeared in August 2014. Her body was pulled from the Red River near this dock in downtown Winnipeg 8 days later. But activists will not let her memory die.
It took me a couple years to understand everything, and I knew that it happened for a reason, and that I'm supposed to go and stand up for MMI and be an advocate and go to these rallies and support and use my voice and be my sister's voice as well.
Fontaine's death galvanized calls for a national inquiry into the hundreds of cases of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls across Canada and led to the revitalization of the Bear Clan Safety Patrol. But the man charged with killing Fontaine was acquitted in 2018. Elroy Fontaine joins other young activists like Cambria Harris in bringing awareness and fighting for change to end the MMIW G2S crisis. It's encouraging for veteran activist Sue Caribou, who has been a prominent voice since her niece Tanya Nipanak was murdered in 2011.
I pray for the next generation to do a good job so they have a better, brighter future, and to work together as a community to support one another and not just go support this and that certain, no favorites. Just let's start working together so things will go in a good way for our people.
Elroy says there's a lot more work to be done, but he's ready to take it on.
I don't see much change other than the awareness, but it's just time to fight back against the system and change things.
Leanne Sanders, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Tina Fontaine's murder is unfortunately not the only grim anniversary this week. It was 7 years ago that 22-year-old Cree man Colton Bushy from Red Pheasant First Nation in Saskatchewan was shot and killed. For more, we're joined by our Truth and Politics panel, Carrie Benjo, the editor of Eagle Feather News, and Nigon Sinclair, a columnist with the Winnipeg Free Press. Carrie, Nigon, thank you both so much for joining us again today for this panel. Carrie, we'll start with you. What do you think the legacies of Tina Fontaine and Colton Bushy are?
I think their legacy is still with us. Anytime there is any type of incident, we quickly remember their names and remember their stories. The justice that they didn't get, and I think that drives a lot of people now to not sit idly by. They're quick to jump to support families. They're quick to raise awareness, and I think it really spurred a lot of social activity online, within the public. We see it now, we see it still happening, and I think it really brought the entire nation together.
And Nigan, do you think these names will remain important for years to come?
Well, certainly at this time of year, it's been 9 years since the loss of Tina Fontaine, 7 years since the loss of Colton Bushy. Both of their deaths created tremendous, while sad and tragic and absolutely injustice. Created a lot of outcomes that I think we can see in society today. I mean, we wouldn't certainly have gotten the Murder Missing Indigenous Women and Girls inquiry without the huge outcry as a result of the death of Tina. And certainly we wouldn't be aware of the tremendous violence that Saskatchewan First Nations endure, the ways that young Indigenous men are treated, the ways in which, many academics have spoken about the fact that, in Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Alberta, it's still very much geared in sort of a Wild West atmosphere where people feel that this is my land, I've earned this land, I deserve to kill whoever comes on it, and etc. And both of those things have created ripple effects through Canadian society that we can see today. You absolutely cannot speak about reconciliation on the prairies because of the issues and the violence that Indigenous women and girls endure and the over-incarceration of young Indigenous men. Those are two important issues that were tapped into as a result of the murders of these two young people and the facts that we are still in mourning over this. We are still experiencing these same issues that led to these deaths, whether it be poverty, whether it be the child welfare system, whether it be the innate racism within the justice system. Those are still here today, and we still see them all the time.
And Carrie, we had the recent incident where a farmer is alleged to have pointed a gun at an Indigenous woman in northern Saskatchewan. Have race relations changed much in the province?
Sadly, no. We have legislation that kind of backs up that attitude. We have the no trespassing legislation, and that creates this sort of atmosphere where it's okay to be aggressive, to be violent towards, especially Indigenous people. There's conversations taking place online that there's non-Indigenous people talking about how when they go onto properties, nothing happens because they're white. The same sort of allowance is not allowed for people of my color. If we're in places where traditionally it's our homeland, we are viewed as trespassers, people not belonging there, and people who should be kept out of those places. It's really sad that this lady was on the side of the road fixing her tire and she had a gun pulled on her for no apparent reason, yet nobody seems to be held accountable, and it just seems so ridiculous that this is happening, and I really fear that no justice will also come from this, just because it'll be brushed off as a one-off and not worthy of investigating. But I think it's so important that we take a stand and say, no, this is not okay.
Mm-hmm. And Nigan, the last question to you here. As mentioned, it's been 9 years on from the death of Tina Fontaine. An entire national inquiry has happened. Have things changed over the years?
On the night or the following days after Tina Fontaine's remains were found in the Red River, there was a tremendous public outcry that wasn't just Indigenous. The gathering at the Forks, which I myself and a few others coordinated that event, were completely shocked by the number of non-Indigenous Winnipeggers that came out that night. There's something about Tina Fontaine's passing that tapped into a kind of ethos of Winnipeg that created a lot of movement for a period of time. I think that momentum has certainly slowed, but for a long period of time, there was change within the streets of Winnipeg, a lot of interest in the issues of child welfare, the fact that she was encountered by paramedics and fire and police services, the fact that she was left abandoned in a terrible situation that no young person should ever have to endure. And so there was interest, there was investment, there was even a place which was created to honor her, to support young people who were in marginalized situations. All that momentum has slowed down, especially with a very strong conservative government in Manitoba that's far more invested in austerity than it is in providing support for downtown Winnipeg. And so the challenge is how can we pick up that work and pick up the spirit of what Tina continues to give to us today, and most importantly, to make sure that there are no other cases like that. And there are many activists working very hard right now, as an example, to look for human remains at the landfill site north of Winnipeg, but then most importantly, to make sure that young women are protected in the society. And so we need to make sure that we ally with them, we stand with them, we don't take our eyes off that situation.
Well, Carrie Negon, we'll have to leave it there. Certainly plenty of great points there. Thank you both so much for this.
Yeah, be glad. Thanks.
Thanks.
All right, it's time to step aside for a short break. We'll tell you about an event being held in Winnipeg for the first time this weekend when we come back. Welcome back to APTN National News. An event that first started south of the Medicine Line will be held in Winnipeg this Friday. Decolonized Beats will feature speakers like Cambria Harris, music, drumming, and a film screening. It's the work of Crushing Colonialism, and I spoke with Executive Director Jen Dierenwater earlier. Jen, thank you so much for joining us in studio here today. For starters, can you tell us what Decolonizing Beats is?
So Decolonized Beats is an Indigenous arts and performance series that we started through Crushing Colonialism. Each event is just slightly different, but we are actually putting together a lot of programming we're calling it Indigenous World Pride. So in 2025, Washington, D.C. will host World Pride, and we want to make sure that we have Two-Spirit, Indigiqueer, disability and language accessible programming by and for our Indigenous relatives who will be visiting D.C. And so we decided we wanted to do a kickoff event, and so we're hosting one here in Winnipeg on Friday night from 7 to 10 at Thunderbird House.
Well, this is the first event held north of the Medicine Line. As you mentioned, it's going to be here in Winnipeg. Why was Winnipeg chosen, and what can people attending expect?
Well, Winnipeg has such a large Indigenous population and so much arts and so much thriving culture that we felt like this was really the spot to have this. We also were here earlier in the year in support of Cambria Harris and the 4 missing sisters. And so we wanted to come back and also show support for the families of those 4 women, but also the families of our other missing and murdered relatives. So we are actually going to have a raffle on Friday night at the event, and part of the proceeds from that will be used to buy some of the Amazon wish list items for Camp Morgan and Camp Mercedes. We also have an amazing coordinator here, Lorraine Clements, who is from Winnipeg and Anishinaabe and just has been remarkable and helped us make this all happen.
Certainly plenty of great things you just mentioned there. Jen, why do you think events like this are so important?
You know, really anywhere that colonization has occurred, we can see a lot of the similar issues, whether it is Indigenous children in so-called Australia being locked away in adult prisons, it's our missing and murdered on either sides of the Medicine Lines, including south from Mexico and below, or, you know, it's our Sami relatives fighting deforestation. you know, the issues are also very similar. And so we really like to work with our relatives across borders and oceans and lands and really try to bring everyone together, because there's so much that we can learn from each other. And there's so many ways that we can support each other and show solidarity and just enjoy each other's company and the beauty and the amazingness that is being Indigenous.
Now, one more question for you here, Jen. I'm going to go back to your first answer, just in terms of the Washington, D.C. event in 2025. That's obviously going to be a massive event in a few years' time. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and maybe why 2025 as well?
Well, so DC will host World Pride in 2025. So that's why we're holding it then. That is where we are based. Like I said, we do work across borders and lands, but we are based in Washington, D.C. And as part of the Indigenous community there, we want to make sure we're really welcoming people and that we're doing things in a good way. But some of what people can expect is we're going to have film screenings and Q&As with the filmmakers. We're going to have art. We're actually talking with the Smithsonian Institution about potentially even bringing in some more Two-Spirit and Indigiqueer materials for the archives there. We'll have performances, dancing, music. You know, we're really going to try to do a lot of media and arts and really highlight, you know, the creativity and the talents of our Indigenous relatives from around the world, but also bring to light some of the issues that we're all struggling with that, you know, are so often not covered in non-Native press.
Well, there's certainly plenty of great things to look forward to now and into the future, Jen. We'll have to leave it there, but I wanted to say thank you, Miigwech Kinanaskamatin, for taking some time today.
Wado, thank you.
All right, it's that time in the show to take one final break. We'll have more on the passing of Robbie Robertson and his legacy when we return. Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. Greg Schreiber captured this picture-perfect moment as the fog lifted on the Atlantic Ocean to reveal a sundog off the coast of Newfoundland. That's a great photo there, Greg. Thank you so much for sharing that one. For the chance to be featured as our next photo of the day, be sure to send your photos to share@aptn.ca. All right, now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the east coast at 23 in St. John's and unfortunately rain in 21 in Halifax. 19 in Happy Valley Goose Bay and 14 in Cartwright. 22 and some showers in Quebec City and 20 in Val-d'Or. 26 degrees in Toronto and 24 in North Bay. Elliott Lake is looking at 24 degrees and 14 in Sioux Lookout. Clear and 20 in Churchill and 18 in Norway House. 19 degrees in Barons River and 22 degrees in Winnipeg. 23 and clear in Swift Current and 21 in North Battleford. 17 degrees in Buffalo Narrows and 21 in Uranium City. Continuing west, rain and 22 in Fort Chippewa and 23 in Peace River. Mix of sun and cloud and 22 in Edmonton and 26 in Medicine Hat. Clear and 30 in Penticton and 18 in Bella Coola. 18 degrees in Sandspit and 17 in Dease Lake. 19 degrees in Whitehorse and Smoky and 16 in Rock River. 18 degrees in Norman Wells and 23 in Wrigley. 14 degrees in Inuvik and 16 in Colville Lake. 18 degrees in Cambridge Bay and 21 in Chesterfield. Clear and 13 in Igloolik and 4 degrees in Clyde River. Condolences are pouring in from around the world after the passing of Robbie Robertson. He was the main songwriter and guitarist of the 60s and 70s rock group The Band, one of the most important music acts to set foot on stage. The musician, whose mother was from Six Nations of the Grand River, penned hits like The Wait, Up on Cripple Creek, and The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down. His influence after leaving the band had an effect on musicians around the world and here at home. Tom Wilson is a singer with Blackie and the Rodeo Kings, as well as a solo artist, and he joins me now. Tom, thank you so much for being with us here today. How are you reflecting on the passing of Robbie Robertson?
Robbie was an inspiration, not only a poet, a great musician, but a storyteller in the Mohawk tradition, in that he could dig up all the interesting details and facts and turn them into poetry. And I think that that is a gift of that runs through our blood, and it's something that not only was in his, spoken word storytelling, but also through his music, clearly through his music.
Mm-hmm. And how did his work affect the music that you wrote growing up, or even now?
Well, Robbie Robertson's writing and his work with Levon Helm, his work with the band, that was the birth of what we know as Americana music now. The Americana music being the music that mixes blues and country and folk, together. And that birthplace was right around the Six Nations, just outside my hometown in Hamilton. It was the Highway 6, what I call the Mystic Highway, where he spent his summers, where the indigenous world met migrant workers who were working in tobacco fields. And there was a mix of country and Western on the radio. And there was race radio coming up from the U.S. that you could get along the lines of that highway. It was music that changed the world, and the world will never be the same. It became a better place because of his work.
Well, I'll ask this last question to you, Tom. What type of legacy do you think Robbie and his work leaves behind?
I think that the legacy stands clear in that all of the musicians, all of the people that were influenced by him, that wanted to keep his beliefs going, should probably donate to the Woodland Cultural Center on the Six Nations. The Woodland Cultural Center, of course, is our living culture displayed and in action. It stands tall beside the devastating darkness of the Mohawk Institute Indian Residential School. So the people down there are working really hard to keep the important messages getting out. People like Heather George and Patricia Dedman, the fact that Robbie Robertson directed any donations to go to that institution, that's important work, and that's maybe what I'm going to remember Robbie Robertson for quite a while, was standing up and making sure that his homeland, his bloodland, would be getting the benefits of anybody that was charitable and interested.
Mm-hmm. Tom, we'll have to leave it there, but we certainly appreciate your thoughts on this, this loss. So we appreciate it.
Thank you.
And just a programming note, on August 16th, APTN will be airing Once We're Brothers, Robbie Robertson and the Band, a documentary about one of the most influential groups of the era. And then on Wednesday, August 23rd, APTN will air the Oscar-winning documentary Searching for Sugar Man, the incredible tale of folk musician Sixto Rodriguez' journey from obscurity, to international success. Rodriguez passed away on Tuesday at the age of 81. And be sure to check out those documentaries if you are able to. And with that, that is all we have for you this evening on APTN National News. For more Indigenous news, be sure to visit our website, aptnnews.ca. For all of us here, thank you so much for joining us. Miigwech, and have a great night.